All right, guys, not only did I read this book after being trolled for a couple months because it was chosen for me like in September, but I'm going to give you my review and my thoughts, spoiler free, let you guys know what I liked, what I didn't, if I'm going to continue with the series, and would I recommend it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Theo. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Today, I wanted to give you my non-spoiler book review on the 5th season. This is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This was published in 2015, and notably, this is I think this is the only situation where every book in the trilogy won a Hugo Award. This one obviously won it in 2016, and I believe N.K. Jemisin was either the only person to have done this or she was the very first. So huge acclaim for this one. A lot of people really enjoy it. Some people have mixed things to say, and I'll get into some of the main criticisms that people tend to have, and I'll give you my opinion on that and let you know how it landed for me. So I'm going to give you, this is going to be a little more off the cuff. I'm not going to structure it in terms of different sections, but I am going to roll through and talk about some of the writing and the characters and that thing that she does in this book that everyone talks about, part of the narrative structure that she chose, and did it land for me or not? I'll let you guys know real quick. So first of all, why don't we talk about what this book is about? The setting of this book is basically on a continent or a world called the Stillness. And in that world, there are frequent or more frequent than people would like seismic disruptions to the earth. I'm talking volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, like the core of the earth, like separating and expanding, and huge cracks and crevices in like the planet, and shit goes crazy. These disruptions cause what are called 5th seasons, and those seasons can last from anywhere from a couple years or decades to like 1,000 years. And in those seasons, there are different ways in which the civilization or that population in this world can either go almost extinct or get just completely decimated. And each 5th season is named something different. So there are a few going back into sort of the lore and the history that, covered the world in ash, and then crops wouldn't grow, and then people starved, and blah, blah, blah. There are some that, the earth, there was like earthquakes, and then a bunch of volcanoes erupted and, covered everything in like lava. So there are a bunch of different there's another one where like there's fungus or like a virus that spreads because of, I think it's ash or something that covers something and then allows for this fungus to grow. And so that one was one that had sort of a widespread plague virus effect. It's a very interesting world. The world is, I guess, distant future. I want to say not too distant future, but I think this is quite a few thousand years in the future. And so it's pretty interesting. It definitely has a post-apocalyptic type of vibe. This is non-spoiler, so I'm not going to continue talking too much about what the book's about or where the story goes, because it's quite complex. There's a lot going on, and I'm very interested to see where this story goes. So in this world called the Stillness, we follow a character called Esun, and she is, for the most part, the main character. It actually follows 3 points of view, and there is Esun, who is a living a normal life origin. And what an origin is someone who has the power and the ability to influence the earth, influence earthly like matter and like rocks and water and, the trees and stuff, I think to an extent. It's a little bit like not fully explained because there's an air of kind of mystery of like how this works, but you do get quite a bit of information on how this works. It's just not completely explained, and you see it in action quite a bit. It's just, I'm not exactly sure the extent of this power or the extent of this magic system and kind of what it can do, but I'm sure that will get explained as we continue with the other books. So it's very, very interesting. The other points of view are Damaya, who all I'm going to say is she's just a young girl who kind of goes into like training. And then there is Cyanite, and she's also an origin. That's kind of all I'm going to say. It follows these 3 main characters. I guess I'll touch on right away the narrative structure and the weird thing that everyone probably wants to know about, which is part of this book, there is one point of view that's written in second person. What does second person mean? Second person means it's written like you went into the thing and you open the door and you see blah, blah, blah. So it's talking to you as if you are in the book. I actually thought the way she did this, and looking back now in hindsight, after I finished the book and after I've looked up a little bit of info for the subsequent book, because I was very curious about this narrative like choice, I think it was done expertly well. And I think that it actually fit the story. There's a reason why it's done. It's supposed to convey some sort of feeling, and that is going to get explored more in subsequent books. I thought it was excellent. It did like if you're not used to it, you might just be distracted for a moment. You might wonder like why is this happening? Why is she speaking like this? Or why am I all of a sudden the character? Like what the hell is going on? But if you just continue reading and trust the process, trust the writer who can write better than me, like I just have to trust her with what she's doing. And I'll have to tell you, eventually I ended up just forgetting completely about it. That's a testament to how good this was done. Like, yes, it was a little jarring at first. Yes, it felt a little bit out of place, but it wasn't out of place. Like it wasn't as weird as I thought it would be because it's only one point of view. The other ones are normal third person. So, every now and then you get to that point of view and it actually adds a little bit of flair. It actually adds a little bit of uniqueness, which I really, really like. So that part landed for me. And people were asking me like, oh, like, what did you think about kind of that choice? I loved it. And honestly, after a while, you don't even notice it. I had to consciously remember because I knew halfway through this book, I was going to do a review on it because there's a lot I want to talk about. And I was trying to consciously like pay attention to when those shifts happen and why and the feeling that it evoked and all that kind of stuff. So honestly, the second person stuff totally worked for me. Now, one thing that I didn't love, like I wasn't overly impressed, and I'll try and explain why, is the writing. So I think that N.K. Jemisin, obviously, I mean, clearly she's a talented writer. She's won tons of awards. She knows what she's doing. She's a professional. It all works. But the writing was a little bit plain vanilla for me. I don't know. It just didn't really impress me. And that's not to say that it's not good or it's bad or whatever. I'm not talking objective here. I'm just talking through my consumption. I just wasn't very impressed. It was very, very plain, very approachable. The dialogue was pretty like normal. The prose was just very, very plain and accessible. And that can actually be a very good thing. What's interesting here is there were a couple times, again, keep in mind, this is a fantasy story. There's magic, there's people with powers. It's in a future world, and the world is sort of really a main character in this whole thing. And so there's a lot going on, and it's very fantastical. And then sometimes there would be modern like verbiage that takes you out of this fantasy story and just feels out of place. Parts of the writing kind of almost took me out of the story. Again, it's not to say it's bad writing or bad prose. I just felt a little disconnected when I hit certain sentences or certain words that I felt like didn't belong. And I can give you examples, but I don't think that'll really make you understand what I'm talking about. I think if you just read through the book and you get a sense of the atmosphere, the setting, the magic, the fantasy, and then you'll read some sentences and go, oh, okay, like that almost sounds like someone in 2022 speaking or describing something or something like that. So minor little gripes. And I think what happened with me is I read this right after, or pretty much right after I read Kingdoms of Death by Christopher Rocchio. Now, if you know anything about Christopher Rocchio, his writing is indulgent and elegant and just very thoughtfully constructed. And the writing is sort of at the forefront of this because of the way that story is told, in hindsight by this character when he's older and kind of writing his story and kind of chronicling. The writing is quite beautiful. And so in contrast to this one just landed short for me. I just wasn't impressed. Again, the writing is fine. Contrasting it with Rocchio's writing, there's no comparison. Another thing to note is this one was very much darker in tone, like a lot more dark than I thought it would be. And there's a lot more adult content and themes in this. And actually, there was part of that is something I didn't really like. I liked how dark and gritty this world got. I liked that there was swearing. I liked that, there was there wasn't a whole lot of gore and violence, but there was there was enough to make you understand that this world is unforgiving and people tend to separate and make factions and sort of turn on each other and that sort of thing. So there's a humanity kind of aspect to it. But there were a couple parts in this where there was like excessive sort of sexual vulgarity, and it kind of turned me off to the whole, to the writing a little bit. There were some parts where I was super into it, and then I would get drawn right out with this sexual content. And again, it's not the content, it was the context. So I don't know how much I want to say because I don't want to spoil it, and I also don't want to offend anybody with the words that I say, but there's a couple parts in here that make you go holy crap, this is not a children's book. This is not a YA book. A mature older teen could probably get into this or whatever, but if I was a parent, I probably would steer my kids away from this. Like I said, there's very sexual content. I would argue unnecessarily. Now, this is very interesting because I would argue that if she just, because there's not a whole, like I said, there's not a whole lot of violence, not a whole lot of gore, blood, guts, all that stuff. If she just toned down the sexual, I'm not talking about taking out the sex or the romance or even really fading to black during those scenes. I'm talking about the way that it's described. There were a couple parts where I'm like, whoa, like that didn't have to really happen, or that didn't have to be described that way, or we could have used another word, or. And so if she just toned down that, I think this could be an exceptionally successful young adult / adult fantasy book. But because of that choice, which is again her prerogative, and I thought it was done okay, just for me it didn't really work. This is very much now an adult book and can't really appeal to a YA audience. And I think that's unfortunate because a couple little tweaks and this could have blown up on the YA scene. And I don't know, you tell me, has it? Like, is this a YA marketed book? Like, I don't know. All I know is this felt very adult to me, and I was a little taken aback by that because I was expecting sort of a, not a YA book, but sort of a little more timid, fantasy adult kind of could appeal to YA book, but it was actually super dark, super sexual, super adult. Another thing that I really liked about this is the way that it talked about themes. It talked about agency and racism and caste systems and like the environment and how, and humanity, and how important our world is and how important it is to work together sometimes, and the fact that we're probably more strong united. It touches on a little bit of religion. The lore in here is pretty robust, and I think you can go back to the back of the book and read up on some history about these 5th seasons and when they took place and what happened. There was enough in this book that got me super, super hyped to continue. I actually have the second book pulled out because I really want to continue. There's a lot in here. The way that it was explored was interesting. It was very unique, and it explores a lot of things that are honestly pretty relevant today. There is a twist kind of 2/3 of the way through, maybe halfway through, and then there's kind of another little twist. And honestly, it worked for me. Like the first time I was like, holy crap, like, okay, that's actually pretty cool. The second time it happened, I sort of called it, but it was still satisfying. I still enjoyed it. If you like twists in your book, if you like unique narrative structure, if you like some interesting choices, if you like really cool atmosphere, really cool magic, if you like things that are explained just enough to keep you hooked to continue, but not enough where you're like, what? Like you didn't have to just show me, don't tell me. This is a very, very good book. Am I going to continue with the series? Yes, I alluded to that. I'm going to continue with the series. I very much enjoyed this one. I'm a little bit worried because people have said that this is sort of the best one. Book 2 is kind of hit or miss. Book 3, a lot of people like the wrap up, the conclusion, and kind of the way it ties everything together. Some people were let down. I don't know. I don't really listen to all that stuff. I like to listen to whether people liked it or not and still go in and try and make my own decision. So this one was chosen to me by, I believe it was RJ during our September TBR swap with the Grimoire guys. I appreciate the choice. I really enjoyed it. I ended up, for the reasons that I discussed, couple minor things that just made me not enjoy it as much, or maybe pulled me out of the story, and then it took me a while to get back in at a couple times. I gave it a 4-star out of 5 rating on Goodreads. Honestly, I can't stop thinking about it. So for me, a 4-star is actually a very, very good rating. It's not an all-time favorite. It's not something I would necessarily reread, although I'll leave that kind of unsaid until I finish the trilogy, because it could very well be the case that when I finish the trilogy, it ends up being something that I think warrants a reread, or warrants, maybe a higher rating as a whole. So I don't know. For now, I really enjoyed it. I appreciated it. I thought it was unique. It was a nice type of story or book to like fit into the other stuff that I was reading. And it's a huge contrast in some good ways and in some bad, like I mentioned, with like the sci-fi I was reading or the other sort of epic fantasy I was reading. This is very, it's a good choice. I would recommend this to a lot of people. There are some people that I know that would be sort of turned off by some of the same things that I was, or maybe, maybe this isn't their type of book, but for a lot of people, I would recommend this. And I think most people who tend to gravitate towards fantasy books like this, post-apocalyptic books like this, earth magic type of fantasy books, I think they would enjoy this one as well. So that's it for me. I'm going to keep it pretty short. I just wanted to let you guys know what I thought, let you guys know that I finally read it. I'm going to continue on. 4 stars out of 5. Really enjoyed it. Minor things, and that's it. So I'm curious, did you guys read it? Have you guys You know, did you continue? Which one did you like best? Are there other N.K. Jemisin books? I know she has the Inheritance. Is it the Inheritance? I can't remember. Another trilogy or another omnibus or whatever of a few books that I've actually seen and I've wanted to pick up. So is there anything else I should read by N.K. Jemisin? I have read her little sci-fi novella or short story called Emergency Skin, and I really liked her writing in that one. And I thought that that was well done. So she's definitely an author I want to read more of. Curious what you guys think. That's it for me. That's my thoughts, 5th season. And I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll catch you all on the next one.